from rats jumping on diners to deep-fried chicken heads. At KFC, something seems to be seriously wrong. Despite the fact that it has less locations than Chick-fil-A, KFC has lost its position as the largest chicken restaurant in America since ceding the title to rivals like that chain. The once famous eatery appears to be going out of business at an alarming rate. Simply said, their food quality is what's causing this drop. We need to learn more about how your KFC is prepared in order to comprehend this better. Unlike the majority of fast food chains, you see, KFC employees are expected to actually prepare meals. In contrast, chicken nuggets at McDonald's are pre-cooked before being shipped frozen to the restaurant. This naturally aids in quality control and reduces waste. Employees at KFC are required to make the chicken from scratch every day, which is true. You might think this is a good thing. The workforce is underpaid, undertrained, and frequently hurried, therefore this is the reality. Unfortunately, mistakes happen frequently, and when they do, they can be much worse than just lumpy gravy or mashed potatoes with hairs in them. Sometimes the results can alter your life. Consider the Australian girl who suffered brain damage after eating at a KFC with her family. Despite the fact that the entire family fell ill, the girl spent 6 months in a coma. Tragically, she is now confined to a wheelchair and mute. KFC, for its part, declared that it was profoundly disappointed, not in what had happened to the girl, but in the judge's decision and the $8 million in compensation they had to give the family. When you read accounts like this, when consumers from all over the world are complaining about being served raw chicken, you know that the girl in question experienced severe salmonella contamination. It's a miracle that KFC hasn't faced more legal action. However, the issue goes beyond cooking or a lack thereof. The chicken itself has problems as well. While it's true that other fast food chains also utilize these types of suppliers, many high-profile ads starring celebrities like Pamela Anderson have attempted to draw attention to the farming practices of the chicken intended for KFC buckets. It doesn't change the reality that these animals were raised in factories and frequently pass away from sickness even before being butchered. However, this problem with quality is not limited to the US. KFC's global selection of chicken suppliers appears to be a concern for them. Consider KFC China, whose supplier was discovered to be selling meat that had gone bad. How about South Africa, where employees were seen washing expired chicken on the floor over in the UK and Ireland, which was then being given to customers? Due to a severe supply chain breakdown, KFC was forced to close almost all of its 900 locations because they ran out of chicken. Consider for a moment that you would never hear of McDonald's or Domino's running out of hamburgers or pizza. Despite this, it's still crazy how KFC managed to run out of chicken for the entire UK and Ireland. Definitely seems to indicate that in order to address this issue, more stringent international restrictions are required. Despite the unfavorable press surrounding the closing restaurants, KFC chooses to spend tens of millions of dollars on advertising campaigns and mainly relies on Colonel Sanders in order to do so. A picture of a rapping, dancing Colonel Sanders or a comic actor portraying the character. He is at the forefront of their efforts to cover up their errors. When you find out that the company's genuine founder, Colonel Sanders, refused to eat at his own eatery because of his outrage over how significantly the quality of KFC had declined, he actively engaged in combat with the business he sold it to. Going back to the period when KFC became a major global brand will help us comprehend what transpired. Back in the day of Kentucky Fried Chicken, as it was once called. For Colonel Sanders, it was a source of pride because, at the time, the 11 secret herbs and spices actually referred to just 11 herbs and spices. Sanders worked as a firefighter, lawyer, secretary, tire vendor, and even served in the military for a short time. He switched between various careers. It was only after he opened a Shell petrol station in Corbin, Kentucky, that he started to genuinely succeed at something. After his first petrol station failed, he tried again and ended up in fried chicken, which would ultimately change his life. Due to the fact that his gas station was right next to a highway, a lot of his clients were hungry truck drivers who were filling up. He started preparing meals for them to start making some extra cash. And while ham and steak were among the original items on his menu, the star of the show was his finger-licking good fried chicken. To eat it, people traveled from all around, but there is a problem. You see, it took time for him to cook the chicken to perfection. He had to prepare batches of chicken in advance if he didn't want it to dry out. However, he frequently ended up throwing away food that went unsold as a result. However, Colonel Sanders was a stickler for detail. To him, superiority was everything, therefore the story takes place in 1939. Sanders used a novel piece of equipment called a pressure cooker to address his issues. He discovered a way to cut his cooking time from 30 minutes to under 10 with the pressure cooker, allowing him to begin preparing each order as soon as it was received. In other words, this novel method plus fresh, high-quality chicken make it better than anywhere else. For the following 10 years, his business prospered. Even more, the governor promoted him an honorary colonel. But Sanders learned that his eatery will be surrounded by a freeway in the early 1950s, while being fully aware that doing so would stop his customer flow. When he was 66 years old, he sold his company. Colonel Sanders found himself suddenly without anything. The company he had fought so hard to create was no longer his, and he was left with nothing but his $105 a month Social Security checks. When he was about to give up, he wrote himself a suicide note, but instead of really doing it, he paused to consider his life and what he would be leaving behind. Staring at the recipe at the top of the page, the colonel suddenly had an idea rather of taking his own life there and then. He thought about his fried chicken dish, the one that so many people had enjoyed over the years, and he jotted it down on a sheet of paper. He made the bold decision to take a risk and see if he could persuade other restaurant owners to sell their chicken prepared his manner in exchange for just 4 cents every bird sold. So, armed with this notion, he set off. This was not an easy task, especially since the large restaurant chains had no interest, but he eventually succeeded in persuading one modest eatery. After that, Colonel Sanders started to get support. His mouth-watering, freshly cooked chicken had already made its point. And soon enough, the colonel could just stay at home while restaurant owners flocked to him pleading for his secret formula. Nevertheless, despite his success, Sanders was getting older, and managing a booming company quickly became too much for him. At the age of 73, the colonel reluctantly consented to sell his company to a group of investors headed by a few attorneys in 1964. He received a total of $2 million, which is almost $17.5 million in today's currency. However, he also sought an honorary consulting position with the business and an agreement from the investors that the chicken would always come first. That promise was broken quickly after it was made. It turns out that John Brown Jr., one of the attorneys, was a marketing prodigy. He began altering the Sanders franchise model right away. Starting at that moment, all new franchisees were required to run their businesses out of independent buildings rather than selling chicken in other people's restaurants. What's more is the careful attention they pay to brand identity. All of the restaurant decor, employee uniforms, food packaging, and branding are identical. They only offer their chicken. From one store to the next, they had to match. To put it another way, Kentucky Fried Chicken transitioned from a franchise where the chicken was valued most highly to a business where branding was paramount. Restaurants started to appear around quickly, but Colonel Sanders wasn't happy with this new development. When the number of stores skyrocketed from a few hundred to thousands, he was initially concerned, then angered, by the subpar food being served. He toured the nation visiting different places in his new capacity as a consultant. When he came across something he disliked, he didn't think twice to speak up in front of the press or the franchisees. Sanders and his wife Claudia started their own restaurant next to their house in Shelbyville, Kentucky, in 1968, just a few years after selling their business. It was given the name Claudia Sanders. KFC's direction disappointed the Colonel's Lady Diner residents. Sanders was so enraged that he decided to leave retirement, and his goal was to open a new rival fried chicken franchise in the Colonel's Lady Diner home. Yet he wanted to be in the advertisements, thus he wanted to use his face. The issue was that KFC was already a global powerhouse and they weren't about to let some grumpy old man stand in their way. The lawyers sold KFC to Hoobline, a multinational food and beverage corporation, in 1971. The new owners of KFC sued Sanders and his wife, claiming that Sanders had forfeited his right to have his image used in commercial endeavors. Instead of giving in when he first sold his business, Sanders responded with a $122 million lawsuit, claiming that they were impeding his ability to start a new business. Finally, they reached a settlement outside of court, and Sanders was awarded $1 million. But even after that triumph, the real Colonel Sanders continued to promote KFC, even though Hoobline was permitted to use him as their mascot. He protested that it is my face that is displayed on that chicken box and in the advertising in a fit of rage. People recognize me everywhere I go, and they stop me. He persisted in whining, memorably telling a reporter for the New York Times that the food they produce is sludge and that there is no way you could get me to eat some of those potatoes. Which brings us full circle back to the present day and stories like these over the years to create the chicken more quickly and inexpensively. Every component of the company, including the formula, has undergone adjustments. Colonel Sanders would undoubtedly be turning in his grave at what KFC is serving now, despite the fact that his likeness is still associated with the firm and appears on the front of every bucket. Sanders Chicken has actually captivated the world, rising from a gas station menu item to a global fried chicken business, but is it still his chicken? This makes it obvious why the entire business is slowly deteriorating. And comment down any of your recent or any past experience you had with their chicken. Is it really okay? This is Visionomics, and thank you for watching until the end.